Tennessee Titans, formerly the Houston Oilers, have begun the next new stadium drama. 25 years after wooing the bombastic Bud Adams, the city of Nashville is looking to move off their unfavorable and unsustainable lease with the Titans at the aging Nissan Stadium. In this video, we'll break down how the Oilers' move in 1996 impacts the Nashville community to this day, all the events that led up to the renderings released by the Titans in October, and when groundbreaking might take place. This is everything we know so far about the Tennessee Titans' new stadium. Fair warning, this video is meant to be more of a narrative to cover the events that led us to this point. Later in the video, we'll cover the Titans' proposed stadium plans and contextualize where things go from there. First, a little background on Nissan Stadium and the Titans' time in Nashville. The birth of Nissan Stadium can be traced back to August 12, 1995. That's when the Houston Oilers played a preseason game against the Washington Redskins at Neyland Stadium in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Oilers owner Bud Adams was introduced to Nashville Mayor Phil Bredesen, and the conversation almost instantly went to the topic of relocating the Oilers to his city. Adams was frustrated with the tiny and amenity-strapped Astrodome and threw a fit when the city said they wouldn't fund a new football-only stadium in downtown Houston. This frustration had been well known for a while by residents in Houston, and public support for the team had soured, resulting in Adams being more than eager to find a potentially new hot market to move his team to. At the same time, Mayor Bredesen wanted to take Nashville to another level and saw sports as one of the most obvious avenues to raise the city's profile. Before courting Adams, he had already constructed a hockey arena without a committed tenant, and so he was more than happy to build a football stadium for a real NFL team. In November 1995, the city and the team announced that they had reached a deal for a new 67,000-seat stadium. Adams would receive all revenue from its operation, and more than that, Bredesen committed to complete public financing, in addition to giving the team $30 million for simply relocating to the city, and promised $70 million from seat license sales. Davidson County taxpayers would fork over $144 million to construct the new stadium, and another $55 million would come from the state, on top of another $12 million the city would spend for infrastructure improvements. This didn't even include the long-term commitment the city made to covering maintenance and any potential renovation costs in the future. At the end of the 1995 season, Adams made the move official, deferring relocation to when the Oilers' lease ended at the Astrodome in 1998, but a dismal season in 1996 forced them to expedite that process. The new stadium would be constructed on a site that sat on the eastern bank of the Cumberland River, which was a rundown industrial area across from downtown. This allowed for the stadium to still be technically located downtown while having ample parking for commuters on game days. Nashville would raise the Metro water tax to help cover funding for the stadium, and as a part of the state's contribution, the name for the team was required to have Tennessee in the title and not Nashville. Naming rights would also provide a slight boost when shortly before opening, it was announced that Adelphia Telecommunications Company would sign a 15-year, $30 million contract to name the stadium Adelphia Coliseum. Construction was slightly delayed when a tornado ripped through Nashville and destroyed several cranes, but the stadium opened on time at a final cost of $290 million and a capacity of 69,000 fans. Before the stadium was completed, Adams announced that after fan requests, he agreed to change the team's moniker, and it was revealed in late 1998 that his Oilers would now be known as the Tennessee Titans, which was made official upon the stadium's grand opening. The Titans won their first game with a new name in a new stadium in a 36-35 thriller in front of a sold-out crowd, and then went on to shock the NFL and their new fan base by going undefeated at home in the Coliseum's opening year, winning their first 13 games at home before suffering a heartbreaking 24-23 loss to the Baltimore Ravens in the middle of the 2000 season. After finishing at 500 in each of their first 3 seasons in Tennessee, and after hard-fought divisional contests in the playoffs, the 13-3 Titans, led by Steve McNair, was headed to the Super Bowl just a couple hours south of their new home. They would go on to lose to the greatest show on turf in what was considered one of the greatest Super Bowls of all time, in an unbelievable first season for Adelphia Coliseum and the newly renamed Titans franchise. This run included only one home playoff game in the new stadium, but that single matchup became sealed in NFL history and is known today as the Music City Miracle. Over the next 2 decades, the Titans would occasionally make the playoffs, but weren't regulars by any stretch, finishing with a winning season every other year on average. Adelphia Business Solutions went bankrupt in 2002 and the naming rights deal was abandoned. It would be until 2006 before Louisiana Pacific agreed to a $30 million 10-year naming rights deal, which resulted in the construction of the LP building zones underneath the scoreboards that decorated the concession stands and restrooms like suburban homes, which fortunately or unfortunately still stand today. After the deal expired, Nissan, whose North American headquarters is in nearby Franklin, agreed to a 20-year naming rights deal, which resulted in the worst-selling pickup truck in America, the Nissan Titan, among other vehicles being added in somewhat awkward locations in the stadium and the suburban home display. By 2022, the complex was now 23 years old and was in the bottom third of oldest NFL venues. It was even more dated when considering it had never undergone significant renovations. Typically, when a team has 5 to 7 years left on their lease, franchise owners began to request significant renovations to modernize the venue or demand a new stadium entirely to add amenities to increase their revenue, with the most recent trend being building a new stadium. Bud Adams passed away in 2013, and ownership was divided equally among living and non-living family members, with his daughter, Amy Adams Strunk, eventually taking on the role of controlling owner after a couple chaotic years. This was somewhat controversial, as Adams' kids were all grown when the Oilers moved and had little to no connection with Nashville when their father died. Combining a rocky ownership transition with poor on-the-field play, resulting in the second overall pick in the 2015 NFL Draft, the media began suggesting that the team should be sold and that the ownership group didn't have enough public trust or experience in dealing with the NFL to lead a new stadium project or major renovation. When Nissan Stadium turns 20 in 2019, local press began inquiring with Amy Adams Strunk and local officials about what the future held for the venue. Strunk then said in an interview on a local radio station, quote, "I don't want a new stadium," and then went on to suggest that a major overhaul was probably a better suit. For the next few years, talk of a new stadium was largely non-existent during the COVID-19 pandemic. But given its age, everyone in Nashville knew that something was going to happen with Nissan Stadium and waited patiently for news to break. As a side story to the dating stadium, Nashville has undergone a dramatic transformation since 1999, nearly doubling in population and averaging a growth rate of over 2.5% every year for 2 decades straight. And while that trend is slowing, Nashville is still projected to continue growing. While not a tell-all factor in the story we're telling, it, along with the conservative culture of Tennessee, may be what led officials to believe that renovation of Nissan Stadium was, quote, the fiscally irresponsible thing to do, and that building a new stadium was the better choice. The Nashville Business Journal stated that the city commissioned Tennessee-based Venue Solutions Group as early as 2017 to study what the cost of renovating Nissan Stadium to modern standards might be, which came in around $293 million. The Titans, however, quietly conducted their own study through Turner Construction Co., who looked a little deeper and determined that not only would renovating the stadium cost way more than the city thought, but given the lease term between the two parties, if the Titans signed a lease extension that would go until 2039, the city of Nashville and in turn Metro Nashville taxpayers would be on the hook for a whopping $1.8 billion in renovations and upkeep to the current stadium. After these findings, the Titans announced in February 2022 that they were no longer interested in renovating Nissan Stadium, but were instead pursuing a new stadium altogether, and more than that, an enclosed one. During the 2022 legislative session, lawmakers pushed for state funding for the project, with obvious detractors. However, Tennessee has never hosted events like the Super Bowl or Final Four, and legislators appeared to cite those opportunities as exposure for the state as a whole, as their broader reasoning for the state getting involved. At this point, the state of New York and the Buffalo Bills had already revealed their funding package for a new stadium in Orchard Park, and this served essentially as a blueprint for officials in Tennessee to follow. By the end of the session, lawmakers approved $500 million in state bonds for the enclosed stadium project, stating further that the bonds will be paid off with revenue generated from the stadium and not paid off by everyday taxpayers. This primarily would be a function of a 1% increase on hotel taxes in Metro Nashville that officials advertise will largely be funded by tourists visiting the state, in addition to sales taxes at the stadium specifically and taxes on personal seat license sales. At this point, the Titans had announced that they were committing $700 million to the project. However, in reality, they were willing to only commit about $500 million, with a standard $200 million loan from the NFL. 3 months later, in July, the Metro Sports Authority, who oversees Nashville's sports venues, announced that they were hiring VSG again to conduct another study to better understand the current lease structure and how much taxpayers were really on the hook for, instilling hope for the few that still supported renovation. Nashville Mayor John Cooper had always been a strong advocate of building a new stadium. However, he was much more focused on relieving the municipality of the financial burden that the overextended 1996 lease had placed on the city for maintenance and renovations, and was eager to sign a new agreement that was fair between the two parties now that the Titans had been in the city for 2.5 decades and Nashville was no longer trying to win over a bombastic Bud Adams. Critics cited the additional study as lip service by the mayor to satisfy opponents of a new stadium and claimed to use sound bites from the report to justify not pursuing renovation. Nonetheless, the Metro Sports Authority didn't wait for the final report, and in October of 2022, Mayor Cooper announced that the city and the team had come to an agreement on a new 60,000 capacity, $2.1 billion enclosed stadium directly east of the current complex, with a targeted opening date of fall 2026. As part of the agreement, it was announced that the Titans would forego $32 million the city owed the team for maintenance of Nissan Stadium, and that the team will pay off $30 million in bonds the city still owed. Cooper was quick to note that this agreement would free the city and taxpayers of the Titans' burdening lease, and boasted that Metro taxpayers would be getting out of the stadium operating business entirely. The announced plan revealed an early-stage funding proposal that breaks down like this. The state has already passed legislation for a one-time payment of $500 million for construction. $200 million would come from a G4 loan from the NFL, and the Titans, along with personal seat license sales, would account for $640 million, in addition to cost overruns. $760 million would come from bonds issued by the Metro Sports Authority, with a potential naming rights deal likely to decrease the total bond amount. It's important to note that both the loan from the NFL and bonds issued by the MSA must be paid back from revenue generated at or around the stadium. This includes ticket sales, concessions, sales tax, hotel tax, and any other cash that stems from the new development. While there were many benefits released about signing this agreement, there were no details revealed about how a new lease would be constructed. We do know that the Titans will commit to 30 years of occupancy and that the MSA will likely be the owners, but how will revenue be split? Will the Titans receive 2/3 of the revenue while the MSA gets 1/3 and all the debt obligations? Who is responsible for covering maintenance costs? And what provisions are being included to make sure the Titans can't prematurely void the lease? Those are all questions I'm looking forward to having the answers to. The positives that we do know about the new lease, other than removing the local tax burden, is that the Titans will give back to the city 66 acres of land along the Cumberland River that can be developed, and that infrastructure improvements and the demolition of Nissan Stadium are included in the $2.1 billion estimated cost. When you look at it on paper, Nissan Stadium isn't really geared for the events that the city would like to host, like the Final Four, Super Bowl, or perhaps even the SEC Championship or College Football Playoff. And when you look at a $1.8 billion renovation to simply keep the team versus a $2.1 billion new build that is more usable, aside from the other benefits, a new stadium definitely makes a lot more sense. The next significant development came a week later when the Titans released early-stage renderings from Kansas City-based Manica Architecture that had already been a year in the making. While these are official design concepts, these models were more geared towards helping the team gauge whether a new stadium would fit on the site of Nissan Stadium and what the exact construction costs would be, so interior spaces and specific exterior detail are largely generic. So until more refined designs are released, there will be quite a bit of speculation about how much the final product will change from these photos. Outside of the renderings, there really wasn't a whole lot of information confirmed about what a new stadium would consist of. What we do know is that the stadium will house 1.7 million square feet of enclosed space, have a capacity of around 60,000 spectators, both seats and standing room, with an estimated 170 suites. The roof will be similar to Allegiant Stadium in that it will be built using ETFE panels that allow in sunlight but maintain an air-conditioned enclosed space, and the playing surface will be turf. Exterior terraces with panoramic views of downtown Nashville have also been confirmed as a significant part of the design. Other features of the building not pictured include a 12,000 square foot dedicated community space that could be utilized year-round. However, no information on what exactly this space will be have been released. The team has also stated that they would like to pursue a LEED Gold certification for the building, which is the second highest rating available for environmental friendliness and sustainability offered by the U.S. Green Building Council. Despite incomplete information on the new stadium, what I can say is that the renderings propose a continuation of a trend that's been brewing with new sports venues. And that is this. We can all agree that if you are really trying to follow and enjoy a game, you honestly are better off watching it at home. The NFL especially is really just a TV business in the industry of producing a weekly television show. So if we accept the notion that football is a TV sport, then in order to sell tickets, architects and venue managers have to focus on other experiences besides the game itself to get fans in the stadium. Restaurants, bars, the large balcony space, all of that is meant to create an experience that you can't get at home. Titans president Burke Nihil stated in an interview that while new stadiums around the NFL cater to park-in-your-seat type fans, young families and millennials are searching for more of a social experience that goes beyond just the game, Nihil calling it a game-long tailgate. I think in today's age, we can agree that creating as diverse a set of experiences as possible in a multi-billion-dollar stadium is a really smart idea, and I think it also helps the stadium be as multi-purpose as possible, in addition to allowing for NFL games in cities that don't have as significant a tailgating scene to still have that same social and camaraderie type experience. Nihil stated that the closest NFL stadium to what they're proposing is Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, and that on the inside, the two stadiums will be very similar. He also said that the plan is to eliminate most of the available parking outside of the stadium and to convert it into green space and other potential developments that will enhance the game day experience. Now that the Titans, the city, and the state have an agreement on what they want, a fire hose full of details and approvals need to be worked and sought out. An environmental impact study, a community benefit agreement, and final design will need to be accomplished before breaking ground. And while those processes are going on, the Metro Council has to have public hearings, debate, and hold votes on the many different matters that go into approving as large a project as an NFL stadium. Nihil is optimistic that groundbreaking on the project will occur by the end of 2023, and that the stadium will be open in the fall of 2026, at the same time as the Buffalo Bills' new stadium. But he refused to commit to a firm timeline as so many details are still up in the air and subject to local politics. I expect that the Metro Council, the combined Nashville City and Davidson County Council, will spend the majority of their meetings for the next few months approving the various measures it needs to, while the team, the state, among local legislators, hammer out the final funding deal and lease agreement. For some reason, the community benefit agreement always seems to take the longest to be agreed to, and that will likely end up being the final piece needed to complete the puzzle before breaking ground. The Bills have delayed the deadline on their CBA twice and are 6 months past their original deadline, so hopefully the Titans are able to figure something out sooner than later. While it's hard to top the previous string of innovative stadiums, I think Nashville and the state of Tennessee have led the charge on innovative public policy, even if it is a big gamble to assume the stadium can pay for itself given enough time. Both the Titans and the Bills are great examples of determining what kind of project makes the most sense for their market and how public funding can be used without burdening taxpayers. I feel somewhat confident that the exterior renderings we were shown in October will be the final look of the new stadium, if not a simplified version. I'm sort of iffy on the look. I think they're leaning way too heavy into the modern architecture style that you see on mansions in LA, and I feel the stadium as it currently looks will start to seem dated after about a decade. The interior, however, I'm sure we still need to wait for a much more detailed plan of what exactly will be included before making any judgments. Strangely enough, after this stadium is built, the AFC South will be the NFL division with the most enclosed stadiums, at 3. The AFC North will have a whopping 0 enclosed stadiums, and the Titans raising the league-wide total to 11, with 12 teams playing their home games indoors once the new stadium is complete. For now, we're just going to have to wait for more details about the new stadium to be made available, and we here at LaBreeze TV will be watching closely.